Close your eyes and let your mind drift to a hidden valley blanketed in thick mist, where shadows whisper secrets and mysteries linger in the air. The village of Lysmoor rests in quiet beneath the weight of these ancient fogs, watching, listening as night descends. In this misty place, young Theo, a boy with a curious heart and a spirit unafraid of shadows, embarks on a journey that will take him beyond the village's edge into the unknown. As you listen, feel yourself carried gently into this world of mist and magic, where the quiet pulse of the night welcomes you into a peaceful dream. The valley of Lysmoor lay cradled in shadows, its cottages huddled close under the weight of constant fog, an old friend with many secrets. Beneath the grey veils that clung to the village like cobwebs, whispers told of things seen only by those who dared to look too close. And in the deepest hours of night, when silence crept into the walls and dreams turned to mist, the village knew to be wary. Only fools wandered into the mountains, and even fewer returned with their hearts unscathed. But young Theo was not like the other children of Lysmoor, who would rather look at the stars than chase them. Theo had a curiosity no parent could tame, a heart that heard music in the whistling winds and voices in the deep shadows. On many a night, he would slip from his bed, light-footed, silent as the mist, following whispers that beckoned him to the edge of his world. Tonight, the mist was thick as milk, pooling in every hollow and twisting around every tree, an invitation Theo could not resist. The village was asleep as Theo wandered beyond its edge, drawn forward by a flickering light that seemed to dance just out of reach. He was careful, watching his footing on the damp leaves, the barest breath of excitement brushing his lips as he ventured further. The light moved, teasing him through the trees, until suddenly it vanished, leaving Theo standing in the deepest part of the forest. And that's when he felt it. A presence, vast and ancient, brushing against his senses like the cold touch of winter's breath. Theo's heart raced, but not with fear. A strange thrill ran through him, an understanding, a sense that he was not alone. He turned, and in the clearing stood a figure like none he'd ever imagined. A dragon, dark as the midnight sky, half hidden in the mist, its eyes glinting like molten gold. This was no monstrous beast from the tales his mother told him, no fire-breathing fiend that terrorized villages for sport. This creature was beautiful, cloaked in shadows, its scales shimmering with the dull glow of old starlight. Silent, it watched him, studying him with a gaze older than the mountains themselves. Theo stared back, his breath caught between awe and wonder, his mind racing to grasp the creature's presence. But somehow it felt right. It was as though he had wandered into a place he was always meant to find. The dragon tilted its head, a slow, deliberate motion, its eyes gleaming with something almost like curiosity. Theo dared a step closer, his pulse loud in his ears, his small figure dwarfed by the dragon's immense shadow. They stood there, boy and dragon, measuring one another in the stillness of the night, each bound by the unspoken mystery of their meeting. Theo felt words dance on the edge of his mind, an echo that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Who are you, little one?" It was not a voice as he knew it, but a thought slipping into his mind like a whisper on the wind. "I'm Theo," he answered softly, the words tumbling from his lips before he could question them. He didn't know what the creature was, but he felt no fear. Instead, he felt seen, as though this dragon understood him in a way no human could. "Why are you here?" The thought came again, softer, as if the dragon itself were uncertain of the answer. Theo looked up, meeting those golden eyes. "I came to see what was in the mist. I came to see if the stories were true." A long, rumbling sound, somewhere between a sigh and a growl, filled the air, as if the dragon were both pleased and saddened by his answer. It lowered its head, bringing its gaze level with his. "The stories speak of monsters and shadows," it murmured, "but the truth is far stranger. There is a secret in this valley, young Theo. One that binds me to this place, to protect the village and those who dwell within it." Theo's heart thumped louder, excitement and something else, something unknown, fluttering in his chest. Are you a guardian?" "If that is what you wish to call me," the dragon replied, and its eyes seemed to glow with a warmth that made Theo feel safer than he ever had. "But even guardians can be bound by shadows, and I am not as free as I may appear." The dragon's gaze shifted, looking past him, deep into the heart of Lysmoor. For a moment, Theo sensed a sadness in its eyes, as if it bore a weight too vast for any creature to carry alone. He wanted to speak, to ask what it meant, but the dragon's eyes softened, and with a slow, graceful motion, it stepped back into the shadows, blending into the mist until it was gone. Theo stood alone, his mind swirling with wonder, questions, and the thrill of a secret shared between him and the mysterious guardian of the mist. The night felt charged with magic, and as he made his way back to Lysmoor, he knew he would return. In the nights that followed, Theo returned again and again to the edge of the forest, each step taken in secrecy, each heartbeat a quiet drum echoing in the silent woods. And always the dragon awaited him, its form woven from the shadows themselves, slipping through the mist like a phantom. It was their ritual now, their silent pact, a shared understanding that even in a world of mysteries, they were bound by something deeper, something older than either could name. Theo shared stories of his village, simple tales of summer festivals, the songs sung at harvest time, and the children's games played along the riverside. He told the dragon of the seasons, of the elders who claimed the mists were the spirits of the ancestors, and of his own dreams to one day see what lay beyond the valley. The dragon listened, its gaze never straying from him, a silent sentinel drinking in the boy's words as though they were as precious as the stars. In return, the dragon's voice slipped into Theo's mind, quiet as a breeze, filled with memories of ages past. It spoke of rivers now dried, of trees that once reached the skies before they turned to dust, of stars that fell and lands that sank beneath the weight of time. The dragon's words were like half-remembered dreams, fragments of a world long lost, stories of life before Lysmoor was even a whisper on the wind. One night, as they spoke, Theo dared to ask what had lingered in his heart since their first meeting. "Why are you here, bound to these mountains? Why don't you leave this place?" The dragon's gaze darkened, a shadow flickering across its eyes as though some ancient wound had been reopened. "I am not free, Theo," it murmured, each word heavy with sorrow. "I am bound by a curse, a shadow that grips me like chains, binding me to these stones and cliffs. Once I roamed far and wide, but now I am tied to this valley. Lysmoor is my prison as much as it is my charge." The words sent a chill through Theo, but his curiosity only grew stronger. "A curse? Who would curse a guardian like you?" The dragon hesitated, as if reluctant to unveil the darkness that lay behind its golden gaze. But then it leaned close, its voice slipping into a low, measured rhythm, each word steeped in a truth both painful and profound. "Many ages ago, I made a pact with the people of Lysmoor. I vowed to protect them, to shield them from dangers unseen. But the price of my protection was steep, and in my loyalty, I fell into a shadow I could not escape. An old magic, older than any human spell, binds me to this land, holding me here to protect the village even as it keeps me from my freedom." The weight of the dragon's words settled over Theo, a strange mixture of admiration and sorrow filling him. To be both a protector and a prisoner. He couldn't imagine such a fate. "Is there no way to break the curse?" he whispered, his voice barely audible in the silence of the night. "Perhaps," the dragon replied, a flicker of hope glinting in its eyes. "But it would require more than I alone possess. The curse can only be lifted by the heart of a pure soul and the strength of a willing friend, a bond stronger than the shadows that bind me." Theo's heart quickened. A pure heart, a willing friend. Could he, a simple boy from a humble village, help this magnificent creature? The idea filled him with equal parts wonder and fear, a realization that perhaps he was meant to do something far greater than he had ever imagined. With a quiet resolve, Theo placed his hand against the dragon's dark scales, the cool touch of the creature's hide sending a thrill up his spine. "I'll help you," he murmured, his voice unwavering. "If there's a way to free you, I'll find it." The dragon's gaze softened, and a deep rumble of gratitude, A sound like distant thunder filled the air. "Then we are bound, Theo," it whispered, "by a pact born of shadows and sealed with hope. And perhaps, with time, our bond will prove stronger than the curse." From that night forward, Theo felt the bond between him and the dragon deepen, an invisible thread connecting his heart to the ancient creature. He returned each night with purpose, searching the mountain's hidden places, combing through old stones and forgotten caves, hoping to uncover a clue, a hint, anything that might lead them closer to freedom. The mountain held its secrets close, but Theo was patient, and so was the dragon. Then, one fateful night, after hours of searching, Theo stumbled upon something, a narrow passage near the mountain's base, half hidden by ivy and shadow. He ducked inside, guided by instinct, his torchlight flickering over the damp stones, revealing symbols etched deep into the walls. They were words in a language he did not know, but could somehow understand, as though the stones themselves whispered their meaning into his mind. The scripture spoke of a ritual, a way to break the curse binding the dragon, but at a cost, a heart's purity, a willing bond. Theo's mind whirled with excitement and fear, a realization dawning that he would need to offer something precious to lift the ancient magic's hold. With the dragon by his side, Theo shared his discovery, and they exchanged a look that spoke louder than words. Both knew the path was dangerous, but the spark of hope ignited between them was stronger than fear. That night, as they stood beneath the starlit sky, Theo made a silent promise. He would be the dragon's willing friend, and together they would break the chains that bound it. The night had turned bitter, the air sharp and cold, as though the mountain itself was holding its breath. Under a sky void of moon or stars, Theo and the dragon stood side by side, their silent forms woven into the fabric of the night. Shadows swirled around them, thicker than fog, as if the very darkness was drawn to the pact they were about to make. Theo could feel the weight of his discovery pressing on him like a storm about to break. The ancient scripture he had found, hidden beneath years of dust and ivy, had revealed the way to lift the curse, but it had demanded more than he could have imagined. A pure heart, willingly given, the bond of a friend, forged in the face of fear. As he stood there with the dragon, Theo understood with a quiet certainty that he would be the one to pay that price. The dragon lowered its massive head until its golden eyes were level with Theo's. There was a gravity in its gaze, an ancient sadness mixed with something else. A flicker of hope, perhaps. The creature's voice slipped into Theo's mind, soft as a lullaby. "Are you certain, young Theo? This path is not without cost. Once you offer your heart, there is no turning back." Theo swallowed, his resolve hardening even as fear curled at the edges of his thoughts. "I'm certain," he replied, his voice steady. "You've been bound to this place for centuries, trapped and unable to roam free. If my heart can lift the curse, then I give it willingly." The dragon regarded him in silence for a moment, as if measuring the depth of his resolve. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it extended a single claw, a talon sharp as a blade, yet touched with the tenderness of trust. Theo stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached out, feeling the cool, ancient scales beneath his palm. He could feel the dragon's pulse, a deep, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. "Then let it be so," the dragon murmured, and the words seemed to echo through the night, twisting into the shadows like threads of an unbreakable spell. The pact was made silent and unseen, but its presence filled the air, binding them together with a force that thrummed beneath the surface. In that moment, a change began to take hold. Shadows stirred at the edge of the clearing, as if awakened by the power of their bond. Dark shapes slipped from the cracks in the earth, their forms twisting and curling, spectral echoes of fear and rage. They were the remnants of the curse, ancient and angry, drawn forth by the promise of freedom they could not allow. The shadows hissed and writhed, sensing the threat of the pact, and lunged toward Theo and the dragon, filling the air with the smell of cold and decay. Theo's heart pounded as he saw the shadows advance, a surge of fear washing over him. But before he could retreat, the dragon unfurled its wings, great dark shadows cutting through the air. Fire bloomed in the dragon's chest, a fierce, otherworldly blaze that painted the night in hues of scarlet and gold. The creature roared, its voice carrying the weight of ages, a sound so deep and powerful it seemed to shake the very bones of the mountain. The shadows recoiled, twisting and shuddering under the heat of the dragon's flame, but they did not vanish. Instead, they surged forward, shrieking in rage, desperate to break the pact before it could take root. Theo felt his courage waver, but he remembered the vow he had made, the bond that tied him to this creature, and he shouted into the night, calling on the strength that only friendship could give. "Dragon, we fight together!" The dragon's eyes flashed, and with a sudden burst of motion, it surged forward, sweeping the shadows back with the fury of its flames. Theo stood his ground, clutching a stone amulet he had worn since childhood, a symbol of his own hope and faith. He felt his spirit intertwine with the dragon's fire, their resolve melding into something stronger than fear. The shadows shrieked, twisting and clawing, their dark forms no longer able to resist the bond of light that Theo and the dragon had forged. For what felt like hours, they fought. The dragon's fire dancing across the earth, searing away every last tendril of darkness until only smoke and silence remained. The night air cooled, and Theo could see the stars beginning to peek through the clouds, faint pinpricks of light in the heavens above. When the last shadow vanished, the dragon looked down at Theo, its golden eyes softened by an unspoken gratitude. "You have given more than you know, young Theo," it said, its voice like a gentle breeze. "Our bond has broken the first of many chains, and for that I am free in a way I have not been for centuries." Theo felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet pride that grew as he met the dragon's gaze. Their pact had held, and the mountain, once dark and foreboding, now seemed alive with new light. Theo knew their journey was not over, that more trials lay ahead, but he felt ready to face them, stronger for the friendship that bound him to this ancient, loyal guardian. And as dawn began to break, spilling its first light over the valley, Theo and the dragon stood together, their bond forged in shadows and fire, ready to face whatever fate awaited them in the mountains beyond. The dawn after their pact cast the valley of Lysmoor in an eerie quiet, as if the very air was holding its breath, sensing the tension that lingered between earth and sky. Theo returned to the village in silence, his heart thrumming with the memory of the battle, the shadows that had surged, and the flames that had raged. Though he walked among familiar faces, he felt distant, as though he belonged not to the village, but to some world between shadows and stars. Days passed, then weeks, and with each night, the bond between Theo and the dragon grew, unspoken yet undeniable. Together they patrolled the valley, warding off lingering traces of the curse that clung to the land like old, stubborn ghosts. Though the shadows had been vanquished, a presence still lurked in the dark, an unseen force that clawed at the edges of Theo's mind, whispering of storms yet to come. One night, as Theo made his way to the dragon's clearing, he noticed a heaviness in the air, a charge that prickled his skin and set his nerves on edge. He found the dragon waiting, its great form tense, its golden eyes flickering with something he hadn't seen before, an unease that spoke of danger. "They are coming, Theo." The dragon's voice slipped into his thoughts, each word edged with urgency. The curse was only the beginning. The shadows were messengers, sent by something far older and darker, a force that will stop at nothing to keep me bound to this mountain. Theo felt a chill run through him, colder than any winter wind. He had sensed it too, the lingering presence, a darkness that seemed to watch from the edges of his sight, slipping just out of reach. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice low, steady, even as his heart raced with fear. The dragon unfurled its wings, their vast expanse casting the clearing into shadow. "We stand together," it replied, a fierce glint in its eyes. "The bond we forged is stronger than any darkness, but it will take all of our strength, all of our courage to face what lies ahead." As if summoned by the dragon's words, a sudden wind tore through the trees, carrying with it a sound like distant thunder. Shadows slipped from the forest, twisting and pooling at the edge of the clearing, forming into shapes both monstrous and strange. They moved with a purpose, a deadly intent, their eyes gleaming with a hunger that set Theo's heart pounding. Theo took a deep breath, clutching the small stone amulet around his neck, a symbol of hope and faith. He felt the dragon's presence beside him, a steady, calming force, and he knew that he would not face this battle alone. Together, they would face the darkness, no matter the cost. The shadows lunged, their forms shifting and writhing, a tide of darkness surging toward them. The dragon reared back, its mouth opening wide as it unleashed a torrent of flame, a blaze of scarlet and gold that cut through the night like a blade. The fire struck the shadows, sending them reeling back, their shrieks filling the air with a sound that was neither animal nor human, a cacophony of rage and pain. Theo stood his ground, his courage bolstered by the dragon's flame, and as the shadows advanced, he called out, his voice ringing through the clearing. "You will not take this valley. You will not keep us bound." The dragon roared, its wings beating against the ground, each stroke sending gusts of wind that scattered the shadows like leaves. But the darkness was relentless, twisting and reforming, its forms multiplying with each attack, a tide that seemed endless, an ocean of fury and spite. Theo could feel his strength waning, but he knew that he could not falter, not when so much was at stake. Drawing on the bond he shared with the dragon, Theo focused, his thoughts reaching out to his friend, willing his own strength into the creature's heart. He felt the dragon's fire swell, a blaze fueled not by rage, but by loyalty, a fierce and unbreakable bond that shone brighter than any flame. As the dragon's fire grew, Theo began to sense something shifting in the air, a presence deeper and darker than the shadows that surrounded them. From within the blackness, a shape began to emerge, a figure wrapped in shadow, its form undefined, yet its eyes burned with a malice older than time. The dragon turned, facing this new foe, its gaze steady, unafraid. The darkness itself, it whispered to Theo, the curse's true source. Theo felt his heart skip, a fear unlike any he'd known filling him. But he held firm, standing beside the dragon, his spirit as strong as the bond they shared. Together, they met the figure's gaze, a silent defiance burning between them, a vow to protect what they held dear. The figure extended a hand, shadowy tendrils reaching toward them, but the dragon's flame surged, fierce and unyielding, a fire born of loyalty and love. The flames wrapped around the darkness, searing through it, and with a final furious shriek, the figure dissolved, its form scattering like ash on the wind. The shadows vanished, leaving the clearing empty and silent, the air clear for the first time in centuries. Theo looked up at the dragon, his heart pounding with triumph and relief. The darkness had been defeated. their bond proven stronger than the curse that had held Lysmoor in its grip. As the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, Theo and the dragon stood together, weary but unbroken, their bond forged in flames and fury, ready to face whatever lay beyond the shadows. The first light of dawn crept over the valley, painting the trees in hues of gold and green, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted across the clearing where Theo and the dragon stood. The quiet was heavy, a stillness that seemed to sink into the earth itself, as though the land were finally at peace after centuries of unrest. For the first time in memory, the mist over Lysmoor had lifted completely, and the village below lay bathed in an unfamiliar clarity, every roof and pathway glinting under the new sun. Theo leaned against the dragon's side, exhaustion pulling at him, but a quiet pride filled his heart. Together, they had faced down the darkness, driven away the curse, and reclaimed Lysmoor from the shadows. Yet even in this hard-won peace, Theo felt the gentle tug of a bittersweet truth, a realization that the bond he shared with the dragon, forged in shadow and fire, was not one meant to last. The dragon's golden eyes watched him with a softness he had rarely seen, a warmth that spoke of friendship, loyalty, and a promise fulfilled. "You have given me more than I can repay, young Theo," the dragon murmured, each word laced with a quiet sadness. "Through your heart and your courage, I am free. And yet, in freedom, I must now say goodbye." Theo felt a pang, a hollow ache he hadn't anticipated. He had known deep down that their journey would end here, but he had never allowed himself to imagine life without the dragon's steady presence. "Is there no way you can stay?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The dragon inclined its great head, the shadows of old sorrow flickering in its gaze. "This land was my prison, a place that held me captive and chained. Now that the curse is broken, I am bound to the mountains no longer. But I have fulfilled my vow, and I must return to the world beyond, to skies I have not seen for ages, to places far from Lysmoor." Theo lowered his head, the ache deepening, but he understood. The dragon had given everything to protect Lysmoor, even as it had been held in chains of shadow and fear. Now that it was free, it deserved to soar, to roam far beyond the limits of the valley. And though Theo's heart longed for his friend to remain, he could not ask the dragon to stay when its spirit yearned for freedom. With a quiet resolve, he met the dragon's gaze, a soft smile breaking through his sadness. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady, "for protecting us, for being my friend." The dragon rumbled, a sound somewhere between a sigh and a growl, its gaze filled with an unspoken gratitude. It lowered its head, brushing the side of its snout against Theo's shoulder in a gesture of farewell. "You have given me more than I dared hope for, young Theo," it said. "Know that wherever I go, I will remember you. And should you ever call for me, I will hear you across any distance." A wind stirred in the clearing, lifting leaves in a gentle spiral, and Theo felt the weight of finality settle over him. The dragon took a step back, spreading its wings, their dark, shadowed expanse cutting through the morning light like blades. Theo watched, his heart tight, as the dragon rose, its powerful wings beating against the ground, lifting it higher and higher until it hovered above him, a dark shape against the brightening sky. With a final piercing gaze, the dragon dipped its head, and then, with a single powerful motion, it soared into the dawn, its form growing smaller against the horizon, until at last it was nothing more than a shadow against the light, and then gone. Theo stood alone in the clearing, the silence settling around him like a cloak. A part of him felt hollow, as though he had lost something precious, but another part of him felt whole, filled with the quiet knowledge that he had been part of something extraordinary. The bond he had shared with the dragon was not broken by distance or time. It was a fire that would live on, a spark within him that would never fade. As he made his way back to Lysmoor, the village lay bright and open beneath the morning sun, no longer shrouded by mist or fear. The people greeted him with curious eyes, sensing the change but unaware of the battle that had been waged in the shadows. Theo kept the dragon's secret close, a treasure woven into the fabric of his heart, a story only he would know. Years passed and Theo grew, his life in Lysmoor filled with the quiet simplicity of village life. But on certain nights, when the wind whispered through the trees and the stars gleamed like embers in the sky, he would feel a familiar presence, a warmth, a silent promise, and he knew the dragon was watching, ever vigilant, bound not by chains but by the loyalty of friendship. And though the dragon never returned, Theo found peace in the memory of those nights spent together, the pact forged in shadows and flames, a bond that neither time nor distance could sever. And in the quiet of his heart, he would whisper to the sky, a silent farewell, a promise that wherever life took him, he would always carry the dragon's fire within. For in the end, it was not the shadows or the curses that lingered, but the friendship, a light woven through the darkest of nights, a bond forged in fire and sealed in the dawn.